What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Scythe, and it's long overdue that we have some separated tutorial videos for 2019 talking about different classes. This is going to be kind of a new series, if you can call it, where I'm going to be going through all the classes. I will put a link in the description to a playlist where you're going to be able to see all of these 2019 class videos. We're going to kind of give a bit of a review of the class, talk about the specifics of how you will end up actually building the class, and generally a lot of this information is going to carry over to all of the other characters, but this way we can kind of focus our attention on one more specific than the rest. So today we're going to be spending our time talking about the Knight. The Knight might not be everybody's favorite character, but he has actually already gone through a rework and is totally viable for the end game. He's actually got some pretty high damage. Granted, you have to have his class gem ability. So for the character itself, the Knight is going to end up starting out as just kind of a basic warrior. He was the first character ever designed for the game, and thus he looks very plain because he hasn't had his animations buffed up and retweaked since he was initially added to the game back in the beta days, near as I can tell anyways, and it's pretty disgusting, honestly. Your basic attack is just going to be swinging around like an idiot. Your right click is going to end up doing a slam down, which does some good AoE. As you end up causing damage to enemies, eventually your sword will end up growing, and then you'll be able to cast your right click and do like even more damage. Your number one ability is normally going to be a dash, where you'll dash forward, but it will get body blocked by enemies. And then your ultimate ability is going to be this shield, which will put a shield around two other allies around you. Well, I guess everybody around you, I don't know, and then they take like a certain amount of damage reduction, and you end up taking the damage for them instead. But none of that really matters, because with Trove, this game is not complicated as much as it likes to pretend that it is on the surface. It is just boiling down to pretty much every character in the game being DPS. That is damage per second, just full on damage. You're all gonna be glass cannons except for maybe a few. Now, your number one ability is going to change when you get your classroom ability, and that is going to single-handedly make this character a character that you can actually end up using, because up until that point, you're not really going to be doing that much damage. Your slam down is going to be okay. Your basic attack is going to be okay. But when you get your classroom ability, it's going to shoot out this kind of, I don't know, Hadouken version of yourself in front of you. And the biggest thing to it is that it's got a lot of damage, but it also is going to phase through the enemies. So you'll be able to use it very easily for crowd control, which is pretty much what makes or breaks a class in this game, honestly speaking. So what they ended up doing with its rework is you don't end up having any movement speed negated or anything. Back in the day, originally, you would actually pretty much just be a static turret. You couldn't really move around while you were using your number one. It does mean you kind of got to claw your hand on the keyboard unless you're playing on a controller. Obviously, this can be a lot easier. And honestly, this is why so many people don't really main the Knight. If it's something that you're into, okay, sure. But honestly, it's hilarious how most of the characters in the game that end up kind of becoming something that's a little bit more powerful are usually just something like this, where it single-handedly, I would argue that this changes this character into a ranged character. It's funny how props actually seem to stop the ability. That's very strange. But either way, that's going to end up doing some pretty good damage. And then his subclass ability is going to be one of the best for other classes, but you can't use it for yourself. So the subclass ability for the Knight is going to give you more mount movement speed as well as extra flask capacity. Now, you've seen me rocking this on pretty much every character, because as you get to a higher level, you're going to end up effectively giving all of your characters more flasks when they have the subclass ability of the Knight triggered, and then more of your power rank up to 30,000 PR. Every 5,000 interval, you're going to end up buffing the amount of movement speed that you end up having on mounts to a total of, what is it? It's like 125, yeah, 125 movement speed, as you can see right there with my Vanguard, which is very, very handy. Not to mention having the extra pots is going to end up being very good for like Shadow Tower and stuff like that. I personally like using the Knight subclass ability over all others, because to me, the Knight subclass movement speed makes it consistently fast. You know, you can end up using certain characters for speed farming. The Knight is not one of them. He's kind of in the middle, not really top tier in terms of speed for U9, but we'll talk about, well, U9, U10, and Shadow Towers and stuff like that in a bit, because I just want to mention that using the subclass ability with this guy, to me, is consistency overall, and that's what makes it a very, very good ability. Not to mention having those extra pots is very, very useful as well. Now, as far as what ability do you end up actually using on the Knight for a subclass ability, I don't know. I really don't, honestly speaking. Like, I just kind of use the Lunar Lancer one because it's just going to end up giving you extra damage whenever it triggers. And I don't know, you're going to end up triggering lunacy mode basically. But the thing is that the lunacy mode gives you more movement speed, which is good for speed farming, but also ends up giving you more damage and more attack speed. And unfortunate or fortunate, one of the things that we've just noticed here is your classroom ability is not affected by attack speed. So you don't actually need attack speed on this character after you end up getting your classroom ability. Up until that point, you kind of do, because most of all, you're just going to be using your basic attacks, honestly speaking. But for the most part, after that point and onward, you're just going to be using your number one ability. That's why he kind of ends up getting boring. For me, anyways, that's just my personal opinion towards it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. But anyways, I like using the Lunar Lancer ability just because you do end up getting that extra damage buff, but more notably, you end up getting the movement speed. And that, of course, is very detrimental to endgame farming in this game, is just having as much movement speed as possible. And unfortunately, we cannot be affected by our own subclass ability, which kind of sucks. Now, as far as the gear, the stats, the gems, and everything like that, that's just going to end up being pretty standard. So basically, what Trove boils down into is there's a bunch of different stats in the game. As you can see, there's so many different stats in the game. But let me tell you, these are the only useful stats in this entire game for actually building character. So for a knight, physical damage, and then you've got your crit damage and your crit hit. That's it. And then I guess movement speed, of course, just because of the fact that you're going to need more movement speed to get to the next dungeon faster and faster and faster while you're in U9, U10, whatever you know, pick your poison. Now, for Shadow Towers, you don't really need the movement speed. You can move away from that, but I would still recommend probably using the Lunar Lancer ability because none of the other ones really do anything. But that's pretty much how you're going to build the character. I would say that what you actually want end game, you know, I don't have an end game knight right here. You can see I got the 30,000 power rank, but that's just like I've got too much max health and stuff like that. Like you pretty much are going to build every character as a DPS character, save a few, like I said before. And with it, you want to have maybe 150k physical damage. You know, the higher the crit hit, the better. You want to try and get to 100% crit hit at least. You can see I'm well over that with 121%. The thing is, with other games, the value of crit hit will actually end up kind of being more of a scaling value rather than in Trove. If you have 100% crit hit, you're going to be doing crits 100% of the time. So there's no reason to get over 100%. And then for your crit damage, I would recommend that you get that to, I don't know, 1,500, maybe 1,300. Totally maxed out. You're going to be wanting to have stats similar to my Vanguard right here, where I've actually got 150 as my base physical damage. Crit hit should be at 100%, but close enough. And then 1.8 to 1.9 for the crit damage itself. So you can see that my knight is fairly far behind, but you can get away with having a knight at 75,000, maybe 100,000 physical damage. You kind of just gotta decide for yourself, because what I've found is that as soon as you end up getting to 100,000 physical damage, somewhere around there is the sweet spot where crit damage starts actually making a difference, because up until then, crit damage doesn't really do anything, because it can only end up scaling off of the amount of damage that you already have anyways, right? So what I usually go for with gems is not really as crazy as it's going to sound here, guys. You always want to have a pyro disc. I have volatile velocity just as a joke on this guy, but you want to have pyro disc for sure, because that's going to give you movement speed whenever it ends up triggering. And the vampire gem for the cosmic gem, because that again is going to be one that's going to give you more movement speed, not to mention the life leech on it can end up saving you a couple times, more so than not. And what I usually go for is just kind of a 3-1-3 thing, where what I try to go for is I'll have all my 3 empowered gems end up being physical damage as the primary stat, crit damage as the second, and crit hit always as the last, with no jewels, no pearls into it, right? And then with the cosmic gem, you want to have all 3 of the light pearls, or all 3 of the pearls into light if possible. That's difficult for an empowered gem. It's not so difficult with the baby gems, because with the baby gems or the lesser gems, I don't know why I'm calling them baby gems and using my own weird terminology. With the lesser gems, you can just keep rolling them over and over again, and as you're leveling them up, you get them to level 15, and then you'll end up seeing whether or not you have 3 or all pearls into light. It can just roll as that randomly. So if you don't end up having it, like you see right here, I've got 2 of them in max health, 1 into light. I would just scrap this gem, honestly, and go for another one, as opposed to, I'm going to refer to my Vanguard a lot just because I have my perfect build on him. You see, we've got all 3 light, and then physical and crit damage as the alternative stats. Now, something to keep in mind, because lots of people always get confused about how the gems end up working, I've got another video that's in the description that explains the gems pretty much the best that I can, because I don't want to get into it too much today, but you can end up re-rolling some of the stats, and then for the cosmic gems, it's going to be a little bit different, because you're going to need to use a different item that will actually just cycle the pearl over to a different stat. It's not going to make that much sense unless you guys know how the gems work, but it's not overly complicated by any means. I don't honestly think that there's any other gem type that you need other than guaranteeing yourself Pyro Disc. You pretty much want to have that for every character. Something that I would recommend is to try and have your class gem be the same elemental type across all characters, because then you can end up swapping your gems at any time that you feel to end up maining a new character. Because basically Trove is going to be broken down into having 1 perfect physical set of gems and 1 perfect magical set of gems. Now, as far as the rings and the gear and stuff like that, again, you know, if you're going for the full crystal set, you're going to be getting light anyways, but you're going to want to have movement speed on all your gear, magic find on all your gear, and then just as much damage as possible. You can see I don't really have, like, I mean, it's kind of covered by my face cam, but this is not ideal gear by any means. I have attack speed on my helmet, for crying out loud, which is kind of a joke, because again, I just use this character to end up giving myself 30,000 power rank. That said, you know, you're just going to end up building it towards more movement speed, more physical damage, more crit damage, and everything that you can, not having max health. Now, when you end up getting to a maximum of 100% crit hit, while having all of your other gems having both physical damage and crit damage, then any extra gem from that point, you can end up re-rolling your crit hit onto max health, just so that you have a little bit more survivability. But it's not really going to matter that much, because for myself, every character in the game, I always use Death Defying. You, of course, don't have to. There are alternatives to this. You know, lots of people like using the Conjurer's Vial, because if you're end game, you're going to have Magic Find trigger pretty much every time you end up defeating an elite enemy or opening a dungeon chest and stuff like that. And with it, you're going to end up having a chance to recover more flasks. So to other people, that makes longer grind time. But for me, I like consistency. So that's why I take Death Defying, so that I don't have to worry about potioning up. Now, if you're doing U10 or Shadow Towers, you're going to definitely want to use Martial Emblem for sure. And then for early game, I would say that you end up getting your hands on Sure Strike, wherever it may be. I don't know why I'm blind right now and can't seem to find it, but you end up getting Sure Strike from the merchants in the golden ships out in the ocean biome. Or the drowned worlds, I mean. So that's going to be this gold ship right here, right? So as you end up buying Sure Strike, it's going to give you 20% more crit hit while you're actually fighting, or while you pop a flask for a very limited amount of time. And then basically when you end up getting to the end game and you don't need it anymore, you can just swap that over to Trailblazing, because it's going to give you more jump, but more importantly, more movement speed, because again, you're pretty much triggering everything that's got to do with movement speed, so you can end up farming dungeons faster and faster. Now, as far as the light stat is concerned, I mean, you pretty much just get as much as you can. You guys can kind of just gauge for yourselves whether you're doing enough damage in these higher Uber portals of Geode Topside. Now, the thing is that I do want to point out is in Geode Topside U8, you're going to be able to get Crystal 1 drops. In U9, you get Crystal 1 and Crystal 2 drops. And then in U10, you get 1, 2, and 3 of Crystal drops, right? Now, none of that Crystal gear is determined by Magic Find. You can have 0 Magic Find and you can get a Crystal 3. However, having more Magic Find, apparently, according to the devs, is going to end up making that drop chance increase. However, I can say without a doubt that Crystal 3 just sucks in this game. You can never end up getting it. So I honestly would recommend that you guys go for maybe a full set of Crystal 1 or Crystal 2. It doesn't make that much difference to go for a Crystal 3 outside of the weapon is probably going to be the most important. And at least on the night, you're going to be able to get a sword, which you can swap with other characters, unlike something like the Vanguard, where it's If you get a Crystal 3 Fist and you already have a Crystal 3 Fist, you just loot collect it. That's all you do. So as far as the ally is concerned, Raptor Berserker, obviously, because it's just going to end up giving you more movement speed when you end up killing enemies. Usually the best ring that you can go for, if you actually want to go for a Stellar 5 ring, is going to be one that's got physical damage and Magic Find, because Magic Find is still going to end up being pretty much the endgame stat that you go for, even though it's not really required for your crystal gear or anything like that, so you could very easily swap it out for a crit hit ring if you want to swap a couple of your crit hit over to having max health instead. Anyways, I think that pretty much covers it. This video was a little bit longer than expected, but this is why I want to have separate videos talking about all the different classes. I guess last but not least, as far as how this character can end up clearing Shadow Towers, I mean, if you're going to be able to handle U10, he's actually not too bad in Shadow Towers. He actually does quite a bit of damage, and you can most definitely main this character for both Shadow Towers and for U10. However, there's going to be other characters that will be a lot faster than him in regards to speed farming dungeons and stuff like that, and there's going to be other characters that will out damage him as far as Shadow Towers, but he's definitely viable. It's not like he's bad at anything. He's just not fantastic at anything. Either way, that's the night in a nutshell. Thanks for watching, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed. And if you did, I would very much appreciate if you would like, sub, hit that notification bell. Again, I'm going to have more videos talking about these, all the other characters. But, of course, I am going to kind of spread them out so that I don't just end up spamming every single day with every single character. Because, as you see, even with one character, we're spending 15 minutes talking about it. Most of all because a lot of the stuff that I'm saying in this video is going to be repeated in all of the others because, of course, considering the future, people might end up watching a Pirate Captain video and not actually watching the night video, so they won't know all of the basic stats and things that I ended up talking about in this video. Either way, I hope you found it helpful. Sayonara, and stay epic, everybody.